This is Piers Morgan Live. Tonight, can you believe this? George Zimmerman says he is a victim.
The victim was Trayvon Martin, you know that.
No, I certainly was a victim when I was having my head bashed into the concrete and my nose broken and beaten, so I wouldn't say I was not a victim.
A victim. Meanwhile, another Florida man kills a black teenager over, of all things, loud music. But are both these cases really about race? Nancy Grace is here and she's fired up. Also Ben Ferguson and Van Jones. Plus, are you ready for some football? How about some racism, bullying, homophobic slurs? Pretty ugly stuff, but was it business as usual in the Miami Dolphins locker room? I'll talk exclusively to the agent for Jonathan Martin, who quit the team, and the agent for the report's player A, who may have had it even worse than Martin. Also, it's President's Day. So what better time to ask President Obama, or ask how President Obama is doing? For that, I'll welcome the newest member of the CNN family, Michael Cornish. I want to begin with our big story. George Zimmerman still claiming that he's a victim in the Trayvon Martin case. Well, joining me now is Nancy Grace. She's, of course, on HLN every night at 8. Also, CNN political commentator Ben Ferguson and Van Jones, the co-host of CNN's Crossfire. So before we start, let me play exactly what George Zimmerman said about him as a victim here.
I certainly was a victim when I was having my head bashed into the concrete and my nose broken and beaten, so I wouldn't say I was not a victim. And I try not to think about that too much because there's nothing I can do about being a victim or not being a victim.
That was, of course, the CNN's Chris Cuomo this morning. I mean, Nancy, I watched that as it unfurled this morning on CNN. With simmering rage, I have to say, the whole idea of a banner headline from an interview with George Zimmerman headlined, "Zimmerman, I was a victim." What do you make of it?
Well, it's very, very disturbing, and frankly, he's got a lot of nerve because Trayvon Martin is dead. At least Zimmerman is going to get out and do his artwork online and sell it for $100 grand and have his groupies and his website and all of his boxing matches for charity, while Trayvon Martin is never getting out of his coffin. Zimmerman needs to just go away and stop rubbing salt in my wound.
Let me go to you, Van Jones. I want to play another clip here. This is where Zimmerman talks about the night itself and his feelings about what he perhaps should have done.
Yeah, I think about that night, and I think my life would be tremendously easier if I had stayed home.
I mean, again, Van Jones, what struck me was the sort of narcissism of all
Ridiculous.
this. Really, all he's thinking about is his own life.
Yeah,
him being a victim, him being easier at home, when Trayvon Martin, a 17-year-old unarmed teenager, is dead.
You know, I'm sure that in his own mind he feels somehow victimized, but honestly, you would expect at this point for him to be able to show enough class and enough dignity to not try to seize that mantle and that mandate and to talk more about the harm and the pain and the suffering of the Trayvon Martin family. And when you don't see that and you see the other stuff that he's been doing, whether it's the arrests, this other sort of stuff, you just feel like, you know, not only did the guy get away with it, he doesn't seem to have learned very much. And I think that's what really hurts people who care about this whole situation, is that hopefully the country learned something, but apparently Zimmerman did not.
Ben Ferguson,
Wait, you actually expected Zimmerman to learn something from this?
One can
there
pray.
were reams and reams of reams where he wanted to catch a black youth. Well, he did it, and he shot him dead. I don't expect him to learn anything.
Yeah.
Okay,
well.
Ben Ferguson, can you construct for me any form of rational defense for the way Zimmerman is currently behaving?
Well, I do think he's a victim of his own stupidity at this point. I mean, this happens to you, and you could say, look, I'm a victim of the obsession of the spotlight on this case. You might say I'll never be able to live in total without worrying that someone's going to try to come after me. But that is the extent of it. But I don't understand why he doesn't realize, just go away. Just walk away from the cameras. You don't have to do the interviews. You don't have to sit down and tell your story. And your story is not a sad story. You're not some sort of victim from what happened after the fact. Now, that night, to be honest with you, no one really wants to hear about you becoming a victim, regardless of the fight, regardless of the possible screams for help, regardless of the facts of the case.
I don't
There's
think
a certain
he wants
point
to
where
live
I
in
think you have to
anonymity.
say,
I don't think he
I'm going
wants
to walk
that.
away from this.
But Nancy, before I come back to you, Nancy, let me just talk about something that happened with me and George Zimmerman today. So I got into a Twitter exchange with him after I tweeted, "You're not a victim, George Zimmerman. You're somebody who killed a 17-year-old boy," and that's indisputably what he is. Whether you agree with the final verdict or not, everyone knows and he accepts he killed a boy who it turned out was unarmed. He replied this: "God bless you. You will be in my prayers," which is the theme of his interview with Chris Cuomo, was only God can judge me. It's between me and him now. Nancy, that kind of religious defense, and I'll come to some of the other tweets between me and Zimmerman in a moment, but him relying on his religion, on his faith, on God, that he's only really now answerable to God. What did you make of that?
Well, I really don't think God and Jesus really want to be dragged into George Zimmerman's tweeting with you, but since you brought it up, I think that he's in a position where he doesn't know what to say back. And you were talking about how somebody was about him suffering because he can't live in anonymity. He doesn't want anonymity. He wants this type of attention. He's living off of it. He's making money off of it. His last picture that he traced, I think he, stole it from AP. He made $100,000 off of not being anonymous. That's blood money. So the more we talk about him and put him on TV, the more money he makes off killing Trayvon Martin. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, let me turn back to you, I'll come to you in a moment, Ben. But Van Jones, this exchange I had with him carried on. It became quite an illuminating exchange about the kind of personality George Zimmerman has, because I then said to him, he was quoting God, I said, well, since you're citing God, George Zimmerman, try this: "Thou shalt not kill," Exodus 20:13. To which he got into a little kerfuffle and said, "Regardless, I will see you in court. You can't shred and delete emails fast enough, amigo." It's sort of inferring that anyone who doesn't go along with his way of looking at this, he can sue, presumably, which I thought was an extraordinarily deluded way of looking at it.
Well, let's separate these things out, though. I think a lot of times when people go through things that are difficult, they do become more religious. They do try to develop themselves spiritually. I don't challenge him for that. I think that's probably a good thing. And maybe the only good thing I've heard is that he's trying to do something along those lines. That's a good thing. The problem is, you don't have to engage. And then when you start engaging, and then the minute somebody says something you don't like, you think you can sue them, you think you can take them to court, you think you can do something. That's the problem. Somebody does something you don't like, and then you're going to, whether it's your girlfriend, whether it's Trayvon Martin, you're going to get them. You're going to do something. It's the same pattern. And the problem is, you put this stuff on full display, and everybody can see it, and you don't understand why people don't want to have anything to do with it.
I've got a question.
Nancy.
This whole business about God, did he find God after he shot Trayvon Martin and before he pulled a shotgun on his girlfriend or had a fight with his wife? And hey, look, I will take a prayer for me anywhere I can get it, but pulling God or Christ out of your back pocket and slinging them around, I don't know if that's altogether a good thing.
Ben Ferguson.
I don't think it's slinging it around. I mean, you're literally almost making the case for him as him saying that he's a victim because you're saying that he's a killer. Well, a court said it was self-defense. So he's not.
But he's still a killer, isn't he?
Let me finish.
He's still a killer.
If you are George Zimmerman, do you want to be labeled as a? Let me finish. Do you want to be labeled as a killer when the court said that it was self-defense? Nancy, you obviously don't like the opinion of the court. Piers, you obviously don't either.
No,
but
wait,
he
Ben,
thinks he's a victim because you keep referring to him as like he's a murderer.
No, Ben, I'm not saying anything about that court decision. I've made my feelings about it clear, but that's really irrelevant. I'm disputing the fact that you don't think he's a killer.
I'm saying that there's a difference between being a murderer and when you act as if he went out there and just started shooting at people or walked up and killed somebody cold-blooded. There is a difference there, and the court said so.
Ben, a killer does not mean murderer, does it?
The boy was unarmed, just like with Michael Dunn. He killed an unarmed youth. You know, I don't know if you've ever tried cases or dealt with the legal system, but to me, that's open and shut. You shoot an unarmed youth dead, that's a murder. What?
Nancy, you're totally leaving out the core part of what the jury, and thank goodness you weren't on that jury, because they looked at the facts and you don't want to deal with the fact that there was a struggle and a fight.
Look around yourself. Are you in a court of law? You're in a TV studio. We're not bound by the rules of evidence.
Let me say something here. I'd like to say something here. First of all,
I sure am.
First of all, he certainly is a killer. The question is whether he is a murderer. The court said he's not a murderer. They said he's was justified with self-defense, using a law that a lot of people have objections to. The reality is he is a killer. He did take a life, and he has to live with that. My problem with the whole situation is increasingly you're seeing him when he's not in the news for doing something dangerous toward a member of his girlfriend, whoever it is, or his ex-wife. He's now just jumping into the media for no reason at all. And I think that is a part of the problem here. He wanted to be a big shot. He wanted to be a big shot out there. He wanted to be the superhero, and now he has nothing going for him but to keep relitigating this, and I think that's a big problem.
Yeah, and also,
we don't want to reward this stuff.
It's the tone that he adopts when he does this. For instance, another tweet he sent me, Piersy, you will get exactly what you deserve, sweetheart.
That's terrible.
Vaguely threatening, fake bonhomie, treating the whole thing as a bit of a joke, but underlying it, a certain reactionary kind of threatening tone.
Menacing, threatening tone against someone he can't control. That's the pattern, and that's what happened. And here's the thing, no matter what, everything was not allowed to get in front of that jury, and juries are not perfect. They're just the best thing that we've got, better than everything else. But here's what you've got. You've got this threatening, menacing tone against you, against anybody who doesn't agree with him, and yet people still want to pretend like this guy is just some kind of innocent
victim. Let's take a short break. I want to carry on this in another block, because we had the Michael Dunn case, almost an identical scenario. What is it?
Well, a lot of people suggest that it's a Florida issue, and you know, when you look at Tot Mom and Zimmerman and now this, I get it. But the thing about Florida is it's one of the only states that have cameras in the courtroom, basically no question asked. So we really see a lot of what's happening in Florida, and we don't always see what's happening in other jurisdictions. But regarding Dunn compared to Zimmerman, at least Zimmerman had one Band-Aid on the back of his head. At least he had, remember that little Band-Aid he had on the back of his head? Well, Michael Dunn didn't even have that. He even admitted to police that he may have imagined that the teen, Jordan Davis, had a gun. There was no gun. There was never a gun. And the jury verdict is very, very disturbing. Now, many people will say, Piers, that, you know what, just take what you got. It's 60 to 90 years guaranteed. But I, as a crime victim myself, I don't agree with that. I think the case regarding this boy, Jordan Davis, needs to be retried for murder one.
Okay, Ben Ferguson.
Yeah.
Here are my problems with this, is that if Dunn and Zimmerman had not been carrying guns, then these two young boys who were unarmed, as it turned out, regardless of any fear that may have been felt by the people shooting the guns, they would be alive, right? So there's a gun accessibility of people carrying guns issue.
Are you back on gun control again? If it weren't for the British, we wouldn't even have to have protections to carry guns. It was the British, way back when we found in America, that were running through all of our homes trying to take our stuff. So we're protected under the Constitution. So it's not really right for a Brit to jump up and start talking to us about gun control.
Well, Nancy, you will be unsurprised to hear I couldn't disagree with you more. It seems like it's entirely down to a Brit because you lot can't sort out your own gun problems. Ben Ferguson, let me come to you.
Okay.
Let's not talk about gun control because Nancy's made her statement and I have riposted. Let's talk about let's talk about racial profiling, or the fear element in here of a older man coming face to face with a black teenager and fearing he was going to be shot and using that as justification to kill that teenager dead.
I think there's two differences in these cases that stand out to me. One is you had an altercation, you had a Zimmerman who actually called the police. This Dunn case to me is totally different for the reason that a guy, not only does he shoot somebody, but then he unloads on a car that's fleeing the scene, and he didn't have to do that. The other issue is he didn't call the police, which means he knew he probably did something incredibly wrong and was afraid that someone may have been shot or killed because of his actions. If you're in the right, you don't have a problem calling 911. And I think there is a difference there. Zimmerman did call 911, and here's the other thing. He didn't just have a Band-Aid, as Nancy said. He also had blood coming from his nose, and there was a struggle on the ground, which is a victim of a crime, Nancy. You should actually know that that matters.
Muddy, he got dirty. Don't talk to me about
mock it, but I'd like to see what you'd do if someone was beating you up and you're on the ground, Nancy. What are you going to do? Just say, get up, woman, and don't be dirty on the ground?
I wouldn't shoot an unarmed person. And I wouldn't be out at that time of night trying to find another black youth to get arrested. You know, he knew he wasn't supposed to be out with a gun. That was a rule of neighborhood watch. So he goes out looking to find somebody, and he does. What a surprise.
Okay, Van Jones. The reality is, if neither Michael Dunn nor George Zimmerman had poked their nose into other people's business without any good reason, they would both, those boys, be alive. And that's where my problem is. Is there, though, a racial element to these two stories which links them?
I think that there is. There's a couple things here. First of all, as a father of two African-American boys, these stories just chill my blood. They're heartbreaking. They're very hard because honestly, you don't know how you're supposed to raise your kids. I mean, neither one of these boys who are dead, they're not involved in gangs or any of that kind of stuff. Here's the problem. Most Americans now are actually on Dr. King's side. That's the good news. Most Americans, if you ask them, do you think that white people are better than black people? They'll tell you no. And you know what? They can pass a lie detector test. They honestly believe that. That's a huge victory given 400 years where that wasn't true. The problem is that it's the subconscious part of the human mind that's actually doing most of the work here. And if you can now show people pictures of African-American boys, young men, and people register a fear response. They don't register with white faces. We've got to upgrade our laws to begin to deal with that. That's just the reality. What does that mean? That means even though 85% of the white people who are killed are actually killed by white people are afraid of black people. Now, statistically, that's insane. White people should be racially profiling white people because that's who kills white people. But there's this stereotype that gets in there. We need to upgrade our laws to begin to take advantage now of what we know about the brain science.
Okay, listen, I've got to leave it there because you guys have to go. Watch Nancy Grace nightly on HLN 8 p.m., 7 p.m. Central Time. I'll leave you with this thought, though, Nancy. Figures just out yesterday showed that the total number of gun murders in England and Wales for 2012-13 for a year, 29. The
Just
lowest
as
number.
You said
Wait,
earlier,
Nancy.
Mind your own business.
Wait, Nancy. I'm going to just poke my nose into your business for a moment. 29.
Mind your own business.
29.
Be glad I'm not packing
My viewers
ears.
and your viewers are entitled to hear this, whether you like it or not. 29 gun murders in one calendar year, the lowest since 1980. That's 34 years.
You know what, Piers?
America
I've
has
spent my
35
whole legal career
gun murders
fighting
a day.
gun violence.
Nancy.
So you're
A day.
preaching to the choir.
Let me say
all
one
right?
thing.
I
I
spent
do
my
believe-
whole legal career fighting violence.
And
I
let's
do
do
believe
something
that
about
in
it together.
Florida, I do believe that there should be a mind your own business law. The stand your ground law, I think, should be repealed. There should be a mind your own business law. Stop going up to kids and challenging them and trying to police their music or whatever and shooting them. It's mind your own business law. I'm for that.
I'm totally in favour of that. Nancy, thank you so much for joining me. Ben and Van, thank you both for joining me. Always good to have you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When we come back, President Obama's dropping approval rating. Does it matter? And the top 5 first ladies. The newest